All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're putting on our detective hats. Our mission? To uncover the actual archaeological echoes of Genesis chapters 1 through 11. We're looking at a period that is heavily debated and, frankly, largely shrouded in mystery. But as you'll see today, the ancient soil of the Middle East still holds some absolutely incredible secrets. So let's dive right in by defining what we actually mean by primeval history. We're talking about an era so incredibly ancient, it honestly almost feels like myth, the time stretching from the earliest accounts of creation right up to the dawn of more definitive written records. But here's the thing, even without written texts from the very beginning, this early human history has left physical traces right there in the dust.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to look at relics of the fall, try locating the Garden of Eden, dig into traditions of the Great Flood, explore the lost Chalcolithic culture, and finally, reach for the heavens.
Kicking things off with Section 1, Relics of the Fall. Take a look at this. It's a Sumerian cylinder seal dating back to roughly 2200 BC. To actually read one of these, you'd roll it across wet clay to get this exact scene. Check out the details here. You've got two seated figures, maybe a male and a female, facing a central tree that clearly looks like an object of veneration. But look right behind the figures. There is a serpent, and it's not slithering on the ground. It is standing completely upright. Scholars have pointed out that this imagery really seems to preserve an ancient recollection of the narrative we find in Genesis chapter 3.
Let's fast forward a bit and head over to Israel. Picture this, a 5,000-year-old temple from the Chalcolithic or Copper Age perched way up high overlooking the Dead Sea at En Gedi. It is literally in the middle of nowhere. There are no houses, no surrounding settlements from that era anywhere nearby. It's just this broad-room temple complex with a courtyard built with stone foundational walls that would have supported a mud brick structure on top.
Now, when archaeologists were digging up that courtyard, they stumbled on something really bizarre. A weird, donut-shaped rock installation right smack in the center. But it didn't have any lining to hold water or liquid offerings, which forces us to ask, what in the world was it actually for? Well, the big takeaway here is that scholars believe this basin was actually designed to hold a sacred tree. This gives us an incredible, tangible glimpse into early pagan tree worship. We know from later biblical texts that worshiping under every green tree became super common, but this isolated setup shows us just how early humanity was treating trees as sacred objects. It's a fascinating physical echo of the veneration of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Moving right along to Section 2, Locating the Garden of Eden. Genesis chapter 2 gives us some surprisingly specific geographic markers, naming 4 rivers flowing out of Eden. Now, the Tigris and the Euphrates, we know exactly where those are today, but the Pishon and the Gihon have remained massive geographical mysteries, basically leading people to throw darts at a map and guess their locations for decades. But that all shifted in 1994. An archaeologist named James Sauer started analyzing satellite photos taken over the Saudi desert during the First Gulf War. And what those satellites saw looking through the sand was honestly mind-blowing.
Hidden right under the dunes was a massive, ancient dry riverbed. Scientists dubbed it the Kuwaiti River, and it literally stretches all the way from the Hejaz Mountains on the western coast of Saudi Arabia, cuts right across the desert, and empties into the Persian Gulf near where the Tigris and Euphrates unite. Sauer suggested that this massive ancient watercourse could very well be the lost Pishon River mentioned in the text.
Which brings us to Section 3, Traditions of the Great Flood.
Almost every ancient society has some kind of flood tradition. If you compare the biblical account of Noah with the famous Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, which features a Noah-like guy named Utnapishtim, you see profound similarities, but the differences are key. For example, the biblical ark is specifically noted as having just one door, representing one unified source of salvation. But despite the variations, these stories clearly point back to a shared historical memory of a great global flood, with the tales just diverging and getting embellished over the centuries.
And today, the search for answers is still going strong, but we're not relying on sensationalized internet claims about finding the Ark. Real, rigorous scientific surveys are happening right now at Mount Ararat in Turkey, the biblical region of Urartu. Archaeologists are actually mapping ancient pottery, tracing how it migrated southward to understand exactly how human populations might have moved and resettled in the wake of a massive flood event. Right after the flood, the biblical narrative introduces the sign of the rainbow.
And this is absolutely fascinating because it perfectly aligns with ancient Near Eastern treaty customs. In Mesopotamian art, when a covenant is made, the curve of a hunting bow is always pointed toward the greater party, while the string points to the lesser party. So by placing the rainbow in the sky, the weapon is essentially hung up and aimed upward at God in heaven rather than downward at humanity on earth. It's a brilliant visual guarantee of peace.
All right, on to Section 4, the Lost Chalcolithic Culture.
Back during the Late Stone Age and Copper Age, we see these booming societies with walled cities, farming, distinctive material cultures, the whole shebang. But then an entire Chalcolithic culture, with its unique pottery and architecture, suddenly and inexplicably vanishes from the archaeological record. Just gone, replaced by totally different people. What on earth wiped them out?
We got a huge clue in the 1960s. Israeli explorers were out searching the treacherous cliff faces of a dry canyon called Nahal Mishmar, looking for Dead Sea Scrolls. But instead, they accidentally stumbled onto something else entirely, a priceless hoard of Chalcolithic copper artifacts stashed away inside a hidden cave.
Now here is the kicker. Just like that Engedi temple we looked at earlier, this massive copper treasure wasn't destroyed in some war. It was carefully, intentionally hidden by people who fully planned to come back for it. But they never did. The sites were simply abandoned. It really leaves us wondering if a sudden, global cataclysm was the reason these people just walked away and vanished from history forever.
And that brings us to our final stop, Section 5, Reaching for the Heavens.
The biblical story of the Tower of Babel is actually a brilliant piece of ancient trash talk. It's a sharp play on words. These builders arrogantly wanted divine status, naming their city Bab-El, which literally translates to Gate of God in Semitic languages. But the narrative totally mocks this human effort, pointing out that God confused their languages, turning their grand Gate of God into Balalal, which happens to be the Hebrew word for confusion.
The infamous tower itself was most likely a Mesopotamian ziggurat, a massive step pyramid with a temple at the very top. These structures were the ultimate symbols of power. In fact, they were such potent symbols that even in the 1980s, modern dictators like Saddam Hussein were restoring them and stamping their own names right into the bricks, mimicking ancient kings like Nebuchadnezzar, who did the exact same thing thousands of years ago.
Wrapping up our timeline, it's wild to look at how people supposedly lived back then. When we look at ancient records like the Sumerian king lists, we see documentation of pre-flood kings with impossible lifespans lasting thousands of years. While heavily exaggerated, this strikes a fascinating parallel with the Genesis 5 genealogies. Those also document extraordinarily long human lifespans of hundreds of years that systematically begin to drop off and fade away after the fall and the flood.
So what is the big takeaway here? From ancient rivers hidden under the Saudi sand, to isolated tree shrines, to the sudden disappearance of entire cultures, these physical clues are absolutely incredible. They remind us that our most ancient, primeval stories aren't just floating around in some mythic void. They are anchored in a very real, very physical, and honestly, still deeply mysterious world. So I'll leave you with this. As our technology and archaeology continue to advance, what other echoes of our primeval past are just waiting to be unearthed right beneath the sands of history? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep your eyes on the dust.